All right, so today we are going to talk about healthy eating on a budget. My name is Chelsea. I'm a dietitian and licensed dietitian nutritionist, and I work at the Osceola Clinic for my health Onsite. And today we're going to be discussing healthy eating on a budget. All right, so when you're thinking about eating on a budget, thinking of developing a plan is going to be the ideal place to start when you're thinking about what those meals are going to be for the week. A good area to really start when you're thinking about that plan is going to be reviewing what you already have available. So, particularly anything that you have in your refrigerator or your pantry, especially any of the items that tend to be perishable. Figure out what those staples are that you have on hand, and you want to start building your meals and your menu around those particular foods. This can help prevent any food waste, and as a result of that, also practice fiscal responsibility when it comes to shopping. With grocery lists, you do want to avoid impulse purchases. So a lot of the times you can tend to do that by shopping on an empty stomach, making those decisions with your eyes, everything looks really good then. And also thinking that the way the store is designed is very from a marketing standpoint. The purpose of the grocery store is to capitalize on finances. So they're going to want to, sell as much product to the consumers as possible. So thinking about shopping the perimeter of the grocery store can be particularly useful, or also just making sure that you stick to the list that you go in with. Being mindful about the products that you choose that are you can always do a comparison cost per unit. So a lot of the times when you're looking at the price tag of those particular items, you'll see the main price for the entire product for that particular item, but then also in the bottom right hand corner, there tends to be an ounce of price per pound. And a lot of the times that comparison you can do amongst multiple products to figure which option gives you the best bang for your buck. Can be particularly useful, especially for items that are shelf stable that you don't have to worry about expiring anytime soon. A lot of the times, purchase items that are in larger quantity, the price per unit can be quite a bit less expensive overall, and it can last you for a lot longer. So reducing the need to continue to go shopping frequently. Finally, choosing store brand products. So, the area that you shop at, if you can, a really good example, the Great Value brand tends to be very inexpensive. Publix, you can get the green choice. So just being mindful of the comparison between two different brands. A lot of the times they can be very comparable, but if you're buying the name brand item, a lot of the times you're paying a little bit more simply for the name of that product. This is a tool to use with a lot, if not most, of my patients. This is a weekly meal planner. There's nothing groundbreaking about it. When you look at this sheet, you can see on the left-hand column, you have the different days separated, Monday through Sunday. And for each day, there's the designated lines for breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner. And then on the right-hand column, you can see that we have the shopping list. So what I find particularly useful about this sheet is that, when you think back to what I was mentioning on the first slide, building your different meals based on the current items that you have in your pantry and your refrigerator, plug those meals in throughout the week first. And then as you think about those particular dishes that you're going to be making, any missing items that you don't currently have is going to be what's translated over onto the right-hand side with the shopping list. So it just helps you stay better organized. It helps you go into the week with a plan in place, and just provides less stress, more intentionality, less impulse purchases to help save some money. Sticking to the list, highly recommend that if you find this difficult to do, just bringing an exact dollar amount or cash to the grocery store instead of credit cards, so that you're limiting yourself. You're not necessarily making all these purchases because it's buy one, get one free this week, or you see all these last minute items that look really good at the moment because you're hungry. And then when you get home, you realize, oh my gosh, I spent so much more than I intended to when I went shopping. Avoiding specific food aisles, particularly that don't have a lot of health benefits. So the junk food aisle, so a lot of times they're going to package the crackers, the cookies, anything that's shelf stable that doesn't have a lot of health benefits to it are typically going to be in the same aisle. So just completely foregoing the opportunity to go down that aisle can make it a lot easier to not be tempted to purchase those items. And even shopping online. So that's a really nice, useful trend that can help from a financial standpoint. With Walmart being a good example, they have the opportunity, you can download their app for free. And as long as you have a $30 minimum that you spend on groceries, you can, the pickup is free. Somebody else does the grocery shopping for you, and it removes that physical aspect of the grocery shopping where you do make those impulse purchases. And as you're adding items to that cart with that app that you have, it allows you to see the running total at the very bottom of the screen. You can determine as you're just deciding the quantity for certain items or certain items that you could take or you could also remove. It helps you be really mindful about sticking to a particular budget that you may have set for yourself when it comes to food. It also allows for increased ease of price when it comes to comparing. So just a really helpful tool to be able to lean on. When reading the food labels, so focusing on the health aspect when it comes to eating on a budget, when you're looking at the food label, there's a couple you want to keep in mind. For items that you ideally would like to limit, it's not that you can't have them, but you want to be as minimal as possible when it comes to consuming them, are going to be items in the left-hand column. So sodium, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sugars. Sodium can be concerning, particularly for anybody that has medical conditions pertaining to elevated blood pressure, damaged kidney function, fluid restrictions. So you do want to minimize that to anybody that doesn't have a medical 2,300 milligrams or less per day is ideal. Saturated and trans fat translates a lot to potential heart disease concerns, and then added sugars, particularly for individuals that have impaired fasting glucose or diabetes. So in terms of making it easier, when you look at the far right-hand corner of those food labels, you're going to see a percentage that's assigned to them. The best rule of thumb that I like to lean on is if you are trying to look at these ingredients to limit, if you can choose the options that have 5% of the daily value or less, that's considered low. So for the limited options, that's what you want to go for. And then for the right-hand column, you're going to see the nutrients to include. You're going to want to focus on getting food fiber, protein, vitamin D, calcium, and iron, to name a few. There's so many others, but I think a lot of the times those are key items that in the standard average American diet sometimes aren't necessarily adequate to what they should be. With these items, the nutrients to include, if it can be 20% or more of the daily value, considered high. So with fiber options, shopping the perimeter of the store, you're going to come across the produce section, filling up on things like fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, healthy whole grains, canned beans, nuts, legumes, always a good option. Protein, trying to get the meat that's as least processed as possible is ideal. Vitamin D and calcium, if you can choose low-fat dairy options or other beverages that have a similar comparison of those two items if you have any concern for dairy intolerance or lactose intolerance. All right, so when it comes to comparing food prices, this is what I was talking about before. So as you can see, this is going to be a standard image of what you're looking at most grocery stores. So the retail price is going to be the overall price that you're spending on that particular food item. So you can see right here, when you're comparing the two, this is going to be a 32-ounce low-fat yogurt up at the very top. Beneath it, we have the 6-ounce low-fat yogurt. So when you're just simply looking at the real retail price, from a financial aspect, it seems like the no-brainer is to go for the smaller container. But when you're comparing the unit price, you can see that actually the larger container, the 32-ounce, is a much better deal because it offers a lot more volume and a lot more servings per container as compared to the low option. The lower, and a lot of times the smaller the item is, especially with packaging and processing, they tend to be more expensive simply because it requiring more utensils, more more manpower to be able to package the items into a smaller container. So something to keep in mind. If you can purchase the items in bulk, as much as possible and as much as you can make space for in your refrigerator and your pantry, it really can go a long way. It doesn't necessarily have to be all purchased at once because it can be more expensive up front if you're buying a huge bag of rice and a huge container of yogurt and things. But if you can maybe purchase one or two bulk items per grocery trip overall over the long term, that really should help save some money. When it comes to produce, if you can purchase the produce in season, typically that tends to be less expensive. And then also considering canned options, those can be less expensive and it can also increase the shelf life. So if you find that you're somebody that you tend to purchase, but you only eat half of it and throwing a lot of it away, that's essentially throwing, dollars down the drain. Things to keep in mind when you do purchase frozen or canned, you want to make sure that there's no added sugar, salt, sauces, syrups. Ideally, they're packaged in their own juice or their own in water to keep your health in mind. These are some examples of cost-effective fruits. Bananas tend to be very inexpensive at 47 cents per pound, oranges 98 cents per pound, so on and so forth. Frozen berries are a little bit more expensive, but they can last a very long time. Apples can be inexpensive as well, depending on where you buy them, what varieties you purchase. A note I want to make on bananas too is because those tend to ripen very quickly, if they're starting to brown, you're not going to be able to eat them in time. Something that you can do is you can actually peel the banana, cut it up into small chunk-sized pieces, put it in a Ziploc baggie, and it does freeze well. And if you use that for later use, like making smoothies or adding it to oatmeal, it's a really good, healthy alternative without having to waste that product. Cost-effective vegetables, I've made two columns. We have the non-starchy vegetables over here on the left-hand side. So those can include broccoli. The fresh crowns are going to be a little bit more expensive than the frozen florets. They do cook kind of differently, but the frozen florets, again, can be very helpful if you get to it, but you don't know if it's necessarily going to be on the menu for the week. But it can be a good go-to in a pinch. Put it on hand in the freezer. Onions, carrots, green cabbage. The list can go on and on. I just didn't have a whole lot of space, so also understand that there's going to be a lot of other non-starchy vegetables very inexpensive that you can find at the store. Starchy vegetables, sweet potatoes, butternut squash. Again, the list can go on and on, but those tend to be some of the lower options. I also do want to let you guys know these are all prices that I found based on Walmart's online shopping. So the price can vary from store to store, but these tend to be, based on Walmart's in particular. For grains, if you are thinking about your health, especially if you have any blood sugar concerns, purchasing the whole grain option is always the preferred choice. When reading the label, if it doesn't have fiber, it's not going to be the best option for your blood sugar management. Buying these items, especially in bulk, it really can be cost effective. Like I mentioned before, more expensive up front, but it can last longer. And it can be a really good way to balance out a meal, especially if you're following the plate method guidelines. So brown rices, whole wheat pastas, whole wheat breads. Breads can be thrown in the freezer really well to prevent molding. The options to add to your diet. These are a list of a couple of the different cost-effective whole grains. We have brown rice, Quinoa is a little bit more expensive. It does have different health benefits, a little bit higher in protein. So, whatever fits into your dietary restrictions, go ahead and focus on those options. The wheat pastas can be very, very inexpensive, which is nice. They cook quickly too, which is definitely a benefit. And whole wheat breads, inexpensive. Oatmeal is another really great staple to have in your pantry. Can be very quick and easy to cook. So lots of good varieties with that. With protein, typically the meatless options tend to cost far less than the animal varieties. So peas, beans, lentils, legumes can be extremely inexpensive and fit within a very healthy diet, especially because a lot of Americans tend to underconsume the amount of fiber recommendations for them by about 50% on average. So by consuming things like peas, beans, lentils, and legumes, you're increasing your fiber, you're still meeting adequate protein needs to maintain your lean body mass, but you're also saving a ton of money. Those items you can purchase in bulk and they can remain in your pantry for a very, very long time without spoiling, depending on how they were prepared. With purchasing in bulk, a lot of the times you can also get, meat options and everything that if you can individually package it into different freezer bags and put a date on it and have, a couple of the meat options that you're planning on having and then have some reserve to have on hand and thaw the day before when you plan on using it. Eggs are also an extremely inexpensive protein option to use. They're one of the least expensive animal protein foods that there is. They're very versatile, which is nice. One thing to keep in mind from a health perspective, the American Heart Association really doesn't recommend having more than 4 eggs per week due to the dietary, especially if you personally have elevated bad cholesterol levels. So something to be mindful of, but a little bit can really go a long way. And then when you think about purchasing the animal proteins, you want to make sure that you're choosing the lower percentage of fat. So with poultry, you want to remove the skin. With any ground meats, you want to make sure it's the 90-10 option. It's more expensive to purchase the ground meat, the ground beef as a leaner option, but from a health perspective, it's much, much healthier, especially on your cholesterol levels. These are some examples of the different cost-effective proteins. On the left-hand column, you can see that we have the plant-based options. So canned beans, super inexpensive, very easy to make. You just open the, ideally rinse it if there's a little bit of sodium in them. The dried beans can be very, very inexpensive as well. Frozen edamame, natural peanut butter, butters or any nut butters, just make sure you're reading the ingredients label. If there's any added sugar, palm oil, don't go for it. Just go for the ones that have the nut as its only listed ingredient. Animal-based options, canned tuna, very inexpensive. Eggs, also inexpensive. Frozen skinless chicken breast tends to be pretty inexpensive. One note that I want to make, especially with health concerns going around with the coronavirus, especially using the plant-based options is a really good option in terms of stocking up the pantry, saving money, having stuff from a longevity standpoint, especially if the grocery stores that you frequent seem to be lower in some other items right now as well. So with protein, variety is best. Dairy, low-fat varieties and skim. Anything with the really high fat percentages like whole fat milk or even the 2% tend to be higher in saturated fat, which is a concern for heart health, especially cholesterol levels. Be mindful of expiration date. So whenever you're purchasing any items, especially ones that are perishable like dairy, meat, eggs, read the expiration date. It says expire by, that's the date that you're going to be adhering to where the food is no longer going to be good for consumption. So when you're comparing the different milk products, sometimes they'll have different varied dates. Try to choose the one that's the furthest out so it gives you enough time to really eat it efficiently. And then purchasing the, if it offers the lower cost per unit, but you know that you'll finish it by the time that it expires, can also be a really good way to be mindful for finances. These are some examples of cost-effective dairy products. You have a low-fat cottage cheese, low-fat yogurt, fat-free milk. With cheeses, those can tend to be a little bit more expensive, but again, following the bulk method can be really useful. And to prevent molding, you can even shred the cheese, put it in a Ziploc bagging that can tend to freeze all right as well, and take it out as you need it. Ideally, removing the junk food from the shopping cart. I know that it seems like food tends to be less expensive, and when you're looking at the packaging, it looks like it's bigger than the fruit and the produce that you're purchasing, but those prices really do add up. Even if they're on sale, buy one get one free, that's essentially you're allocating this money towards this food that's not going to benefit your health or support your health goals, whatever those may be. And you're taking that money away from the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains, the healthy things. So just be mindful about where you're designating that dollar. By removing that junk food from your shopping cart, that will immediately save money. So also something to consider. An activity I recommend everybody to do is, if you can save all of your food related receipts for 1 month, keep it somewhere safe. At the end of that month, highlight the following foods. So anything that is a caloric beverage or drink. So coffee that you get from Starbucks, alcohol, soda, sports drinks, sweet tea, juice, milkshakes, the list can go on. If you look at the nutrition label, if it says added sugars, that counts. Look at the food that has sugar added to it as well. So cake, ice cream, any of your packaged snacks, crackers, chips, popcorn, bars being included. Those tend to be very, very high in calories and a lot of other additives that our body doesn't really need. And any food that you get from fast food meals. Calculate the total cost spent on all of those above listed items, and then give yourself a think about the amount of produce, grains, lean meats, low-fat dairy, beans, legumes, and nuts based on those above listed prices if you had purchased those in place of the junk food. So just something to be mindful of, creating that awareness and just where you really want to spend that dollar to help promote your health. Kitchen hacks to think about, especially when being on a budget. When you're storing your food, you want to use the FIFO method. So what that stands for, it's an acronym for first in, first out. What you want to do is you want to place the items with the nearest approaching expiration date in the front and use those daily to prevent food waste. This does a good job of keeping the food front and center in front of you when you go to open the fridge, so that you're being mindful about the products that you're using, so that again you're not tossing any food unnecessarily. Cooking in bulk can be extremely helpful, especially from a meal prep standpoint, but also making sure that you're getting the food cooked and prepared prior to expiring. Having those leftovers readily available during the week can save money and time, which is really nice. And by knowing that you already have food cooked and prepared at home, especially on a day that's busy, you're stressed, you're tired, you don't feel like cooking, it reduces the need to feel like you have to go through the drive for your dinner, because you already have food at home that you don't want to waste. If you know that you won't consume the leftovers before they expire, freeze for a later use. So make sure that you always add the date that you prepared the food on any Ziploc freezer bags or any other type of storaging that you're using. And from a freezer perspective, use it within 6 months of freezing it. If you've prepared the item and it's been sitting in the fridge, you want to use it within 4 to 5 days before it has the potential to spoil. If you do all of these, suggested activities, you find that you're still in a pinch, it's very stressful for you to make ends meet. There are a lot of government-funded programs that you can also apply for. So some of those being the SNAP, so the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, really good one for anybody that if you feel like financially it's hard, all other bills, you can meet with one of their officers and they can determine the amount of money they can help allocate you towards per month. You get a debit card to use at most participating grocery stores. Women, Infant, and Children. This is a program that's specifically designated toward women who are pregnant or lactating and their children up to the age of 5 if they are considered food insecure per the poverty lines. So With WIC, they do have specific food products that are eligible to be used. So something to be mindful of, if you're eligible, you're using that, it'll be dedicated towards certain healthy foods. Nutrition programs are available in a lot of schools for children that are from low income families, and a lot of those programs, the meals are designated to meet certain guidelines to make sure that they're healthy, but it does provide a lot of assistance for children that need the adequate nutrition, but for the parents, if there's a little bit of a financial struggle. So these are all really good opportunities to lean on as well if you need the extra help. All right. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and let's see here. If you want to reach out in the chat bar, I can go ahead and answer for you now. All right. Thank you so much for joining, you guys. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. I hope that you found some of this information instructional. And if you are looking for any additional resources, particularly that meal planning sheet that I listed at the beginning of the presentation, go ahead and reach out to the front desk personnel at My Health Onsite, and we can make sure that they have those available if you want to start using that for your meal planning techniques. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.